parents stole my inheritance until a builder found Grandma's $1.9 million secret. I am 24, male, an HVAC technician working out of Knoxville, Tennessee. I drive a work van with a busted AC, the irony of which my co-workers have never once let me forget. I make decent money. I live simply. And until 14 months ago, I believed that the people who raised me were, at minimum, honest. Not warm, not particularly generous, but honest. That was the one thing I'd stake my understanding of them on. Turned out I'd been working off a bad blueprint the whole time. My grandmother died in February, 17 months ago. She was 81, sharp until her final year, and had lived alone in a small ranch house in a town called Lenoir City, about 30 miles outside Knoxville. She had grown up with very little, married a man who worked in construction and land acquisition, and lived the rest of her life with the quiet self-sufficiency of someone who'd been poor long enough to know that security was something you built, not something that arrived. She used to say to me, specifically to me, not to my parents, not to my younger sister, "You remind me of your grandfather. He worked with his hands, and he thought before he spoke, and he never took more than he earned." I'm going to make sure you're set right. I heard some version of that sentence maybe a dozen times over the years. I never pressed her on it. It didn't feel right to ask someone what they planned to leave you. When she died, my parents handled everything. They had been her de facto caregivers for the last 3 years, managing her medical appointments, her bills, her prescriptions, her mail. My father had power of attorney. After she passed, they were named co-executors of her estate. My mother told me within the week that the estate was modest, that the medical costs over the past 2 years had been significant, and that after the house sold and the debts cleared, there would be very little left to distribute. She used the word unfortunately 3 times in that conversation. The house sold in 6 weeks. My parents handled the transaction. I received a box containing my grandmother's Bible, a watch that had belonged to my grandfather, and a set of socket wrenches he'd used in his construction days. My mother presented these to me with the gravity of someone delivering something meaningful. I thanked her and put them in my van. I want to be clear about something. I was not fixated on money. Grief doesn't work that way, not in the first weeks. What made me uneasy wasn't the distribution. It was the speed. Probate in Tennessee typically takes a minimum of 4 months to allow creditor claims. My parents had the estate substantially wrapped up in 9 weeks. I noticed that. I filed it away. Then, in May, 3 months after she died, my phone rang from an unknown number. The man on the other end identified himself as a contractor who had purchased my grandmother's house with the intention of renovating and flipping it. He was calling, he said, because during demolition work in the attic, his crew had broken through a section of insulated wall cavity and found a fireproof document box wedged between the joists. Locked. He had not opened it. He'd found my name and number through the estate sale paperwork in the county clerk's records, where I was listed as a beneficiary. He said, "I figured someone ought to know it's here." I drove to Lenoir City that evening. He met me at the house, handed me the box, and went back to his crew without asking a single question. I sat in the cab of my work van in the driveway of my grandmother's gutted house and picked the lock with a flathead in under 30 seconds, a skill my grandfather had taught me, incidentally, using those same socket wrenches. Inside the box, a 3-page handwritten letter addressed to me by name, a copy of a property deed, a folder of correspondence from a commercial real estate developer, and a document from a Knoxville brokerage that I didn't fully understand until I read it twice. The letter was in my grandmother's handwriting. It started, "If you're reading this, then I wasn't careful enough about who I trusted with my affairs. I sat in that driveway for a long time. Then I photographed every page, locked the box, put in my toolbox, and drove home to call an attorney. The property deed inside that box was dated 1974. My grandfather had purchased a 2.3-acre parcel on a state highway corridor outside Lenore City for $11,500. After he died in 1999, title transferred to my grandmother automatically. They'd held it in joint tenancy. She'd paid the property taxes on it every year for the next 2 decades without telling a soul, because my grandfather had told her, that land is going to be worth something. Hold it until it is. He'd been right. The highway corridor had developed steadily through the 2000s and accelerated through the 2010s. The parcel now sat between a regional grocery distribution center and a newly built medical clinic, directly adjacent to a signalized intersection. The developer correspondence in that folder showed a written offer 14 months before my grandmother died of $1,900,000 for the land. My grandmother had declined. The developer had followed up twice. She declined again. Her letter explained why. She had written in her deliberate, slightly old-fashioned cursive, I told them no because I had already decided what that land was for. I meant for it to go to you outright, with enough left for your sister and for a small portion to your parents. I wrote this down for my attorney, and I expect it was done properly. If it wasn't, this letter and these documents are my true intention, and I hope someone with good sense will make it right. The brokerage document was a separate matter, a modest investment account worth approximately $74,000 that had not appeared in the estate inventory either. I sat with my attorney the following morning. She practices estate litigation in Knoxville and has a manner I describe as methodical and unhurried, which turned out to be useful over the coming months. I laid out everything: the document box, the letter, the deed, the developer correspondence, the brokerage account, the timeline of the estate closure. She pulled up the probate filing from the county court system while I sat across from her. The estate inventory my parents had submitted listed the residential property, 2 vehicle titles, personal effects, and a checking account with a balance of $3,200. No commercial parcel, no brokerage account. She looked at me over her reading glasses. Did they know about the land? My father had power of attorney for 3 years, I said. He managed her property taxes. She nodded slowly. Then they knew. What my parents had done, she explained, was executed a quitclaim deed on the commercial parcel approximately 6 weeks before my grandmother died, during a period when her cognitive decline was documented in her medical records. The deed transferred the parcel from my grandmother into a family LLC my father had incorporated quietly the prior year. The LLC's only members were my parents. Under Tennessee law, a transfer executed under undue influence or during a period of documented incapacity can be challenged and voided. The concealment of a transfer from the probate inventory constituted fraud on the court, a breach of fiduciary duty that exposed them to removal as executors, a surcharge order, and potential criminal referral. The brokerage account had been liquidated 3 weeks after her death. The funds had been transferred to my parents' personal joint account. My attorney filed a petition to reopen the estate in Lenore City Probate Court that week. She simultaneously filed a civil complaint for breach of fiduciary duty, fraudulent concealment, and unjust enrichment. My parents found out 4 days later when they were formally served. My mother called me that evening. Her voice was composed in the way voices are when someone has rehearsed the call. She said I had made a terrible mistake. She said the land had been a family asset that my grandmother had always intended for all of them. She said my grandmother had been confused in her final months and that her letter, the one I'd found, reflected a state of mind that wasn't reliable. She said I was tearing the family apart over money and that my grandfather would be ashamed. You managed her property taxes, I said, for 3 years. So you knew about the land the whole time you were telling me the estate had nothing. She didn't answer that directly. Instead, she said I should think carefully about what I was doing and ended the call. Then my father called. Then an aunt I hadn't spoken to in 4 years called, her voice full of concern, urging me to consider what this would do to everyone. Then my sister texted asking if I really needed to go this far. They were working the phones. Fast, coordinated, thorough. Exactly like people who'd anticipated this and had a response ready. I turned off my personal phone, went back to my work van, and scheduled my next service call. And my parents' first legal maneuver was a motion to dismiss the reopening petition, arguing the estate had been properly administered under the disclosed asset inventory and that my grandmother's quitclaim deed transfer was a valid inter vivos gift, a voluntary transfer made while alive. Their attorney was experienced and filed quickly. He argued the LLC transfer had been made with full knowledge and consent and attached a single supporting document, a one-page, handwritten statement attributed to my grandmother, dated 4 months before her death, expressing her wish to gift the commercial parcel to the family LLC. My attorney requested the original document for handwriting analysis and cross-referenced the date against my grandmother's medical records. Her primary care physician had documented at an appointment 6 weeks before that date that she was experiencing significant short-term memory impairment and had recommended evaluation for moderate-stage dementia. He had also noted in the record that she had expressed confusion during the visit about whether her husband was still alive. My grandfather had been dead for 24 years. The handwriting analyst came back within 3 weeks. The signature on the gift statement showed pen pressure and letter form inconsistencies consistent with a document signed under motor impairment. The body of the statement, however, my attorney focused on this, used phrasing and sentence construction that did not match my grandmother's writing style as demonstrated in years of personal correspondence, including the 3-page letter I'd found. She concluded the document had likely been composed by someone else and presented to my grandmother for signature. The motion to dismiss was denied. My parents escalated immediately. The second move came through my sister. She texted me a long message, clearly composed with help, explaining that she had always believed the land would eventually benefit everyone, that she had been told by our parents it was being held in the LLC for tax purposes, and that she was not comfortable with how the legal process was making the family look. Embedded in the message, almost as an aside, was a suggestion. If I was willing to settle privately, my parents would offer me $200,000 from the LLC's equity and transfer the brokerage account balance back. No court involvement. No further claims. $200,000 out of $1.9 million. I forwarded the message to my attorney without responding. The third move was more direct. My father showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday evening. I did not let him in. He stood in the hallway and told me, in a low, controlled voice, that he had documentation of things from my past, an arrest record from when I was 19 for a minor possession charge that had been expunged, that he was prepared to use to establish a pattern of character, if this went to trial. He said he didn't want to do that. He said he was giving me the opportunity to be smart about this. I recorded that conversation on my phone from the moment I opened the door. Right, I have under Tennessee's one-party consent law. I sent the recording to my attorney the next morning. She filed a motion for sanctions against my parents and their counsel for witness intimidation and a supplemental brief incorporating the extortion attempt into the civil complaint. The probate judge at the next hearing was visibly displeased. He issued a formal admonishment from a bench. My parents' attorney looked at the floor. The fourth move was the most desperate. 3 weeks before the scheduled full hearing on the estate reopening, my parents filed for a modification of the LLC structure that would have transferred the commercial parcel to a third-party holding company, effectively trying to move the asset beyond the court's reach. My attorney caught it through a routine title search update and filed an emergency injunction the same day. The court granted it within 48 hours and attached additional sanctions. By the time we arrived at the full hearing, my parents had spent approximately $84,000 in legal fees defending a position that had grown structurally weaker with every motion they filed. Their attorney, I noticed, no longer looked comfortable. The probate judge removed them as co-executors. He appointed a neutral administrator. He ordered the commercial parcel transferred back into the estate immediately. He ordered the brokerage account funds, with interest accrued from date of liquidation, returned within 30 days. Then he referred the matter to the district attorney's office. The DA's referral covered 2 potential charges: theft of property valued over $250,000 under Tennessee Code annotated section 39-14-105, a Class A felony, and fraudulent breach of fiduciary duty under section 39-14-114. A Class A felony in Tennessee carries a sentencing range of 15 to 60 years. That number tends to focus people's decision-making. My parents retained a criminal defense attorney within the week. 6 weeks of negotiations followed between the DA's office, the defense, and the estate's neutral administrator, who represented my interests in the civil track. I was not in those rooms. My attorney briefed me by phone every few days in terms that were precise and unsentimental, which I appreciated. The civil settlement came first. My parents agreed to the following: full transfer of the commercial parcel back to the estate, return of $74,000 from the brokerage liquidation, plus $6,200 in accrued interest, payment of all court-ordered sanctions totaling $31,000, and reimbursement of my legal fees. In total, the return to the estate was approximately $1,970,000. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue further civil claims. The criminal track resolved separately and was not mine to control. The DA offered a negotiated plea. Both parents pleaded guilty to 1 count each of theft over $250,000, reduced to a Class B felony in exchange for full cooperation with the civil restitution, a suspended sentence with 5 years supervised probation, and a permanent bar from serving as executor, trustee, or financial agent for any estate in the state of Tennessee. No jail time, but a felony record and the collateral consequences that follow one for the rest of a working life. My father had run a small accounting practice for 22 years. His professional license was reviewed by the state board within 90 days of the conviction. It was not renewed. Under my grandmother's documented intent, the letter, the brokerage records, and the developer correspondence, my attorney successfully argued for the estate to be distributed as she had written. The commercial parcel sold 11 weeks later to a regional development group for $1,885,000. After estate administration costs and the legal fee reimbursements, I received a distribution of $1,340,000. My sister received $280,000, the portion my grandmother had specified, a charitable remainder, as my grandmother had noted in her letter, went to a small church in Lenore City she had attended for 40 years. I paid off my work van. I bought a modest house in North Knoxville, a 3-bedroom with a detached garage. I kept the socket wrenches and the Bible and my grandfather's watch. My sister reached out twice, once to say she hadn't known what our parents had done, and I believe her, partially. She had benefited from years of smaller financial advantages I couldn't fully document, but the specific scheme she appeared to have been kept out of. Our relationship is something I'm still deciding the shape of. I don't have a verdict yet. My parents have not contacted me. I have not contacted them. I don't know what their days look like now, and I find that I don't need to. What I think about most when I think about all of it is the document box in the attic. My grandmother had put it there deliberately, between the joists, in the insulated cavity, in the one place that would survive a sale but reveal itself during demolition. She had known that someone, someday, would take the house apart. She had hidden the truth somewhere it couldn't be buried permanently. She had trusted that the right person would find it and do something with it. A man I'd never met drove to that house, spent 2 hours at his own inconvenience tracking down my contact information, handed me a box, and asked nothing in return. My grandmother had always said I reminded her of my grandfather because I worked with my hands and thought before I spoke. I think what she actually meant was that she trusted me to recognize the value of what she left behind. Not just the land, but the principle it represented. That some things are built to outlast the people who try to take them. She built for 50 years. She hid the evidence where hands like mine would find it. I found it.